This is Ministry Conversations. Join us as we sit down with ministry experts from across Texas Baptist life and answer practical questions for effective ministry. We want to help your church fulfill the Great Commission fueled by the Great Commandment.
Welcome to Ministry Conversations. My name is Clay Jacobson. I am the director of the cooperative program, soon to be the director of church starting for Texas Baptist. So October 1.
And I'm Mark Jones. I'm the state director for collegiate ministry for Texas Baptist, or BSM. It's known as.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, thanks. Me too.
I wish I had been involved in Baptist student ministry as a college student. I was a PK. I was in the Corps Cadets at A&M, and
you don't have the same haircut, Clay, that you had probably as a and the facial hair and all that. That probably didn't happen for you when you were in the Corps.
I might be compensating a little bit.
I wasn't going to say that out loud, but no, that's okay.
So I feel like I missed something out, with that, because I just, so many of the ministers that I meet, this is where they were shaped deeply. It was in the Baptist student ministry at the university that they attended here in Texas, and so is that something you see common? I
think that just the history of BSM, or what was called BSU, for so many, it was a shaping time, and I think as BSU worked in partnership with local churches in the area, worked with associations, and of course the connection to the state convention, Baptist General Convention of Texas. There was some real strategic thinking, Clay, even back, post World War II, and actually BSU, or collegiate ministry, as a department of Texas Baptist, goes 100 years plus back into prayer groups at A&M and Baylor and Mary Hardin Baylor and the University of Texas.
They pray there?
Where, a little bit. I mean, a little bit. They need prayer. How about that? But there was really a movement of God and a real intentionality by students to approach leaders within the convention, saying they needed to create a student work department, and that really over time developed into what we've seen as a campus ministry focus, where the focus was on the college campus. And there was some real bold leadership post World War II to buy property on a lot of our major universities at University of Texas, or at A&M, or at Texas, what's known as Texas State, or Southwest Texas State back in the day. And there was a buying of land, saying, let's have a facility here, a place to gather and worship and train for college students, with a real focus. And it was meant to be an extension of Texas Baptist churches and an extension of associations that cared about engaging students at that stage of life.
So with that history, where are we at now in Texas? And a lot of folks, I think,
that's a great question. We're at a place in Texas where BSM, or collegiate ministry, is very strong and growing. In my years and my role as the state director, and then before that as a campus minister, we've just seen a great kind of intentional growth in not only the ministry on traditional big campuses, four-year colleges, but a real focus on two-year schools and extensions of big schools. We've really tried to have a what's next and who's next when it comes to reaching students for Christ, being intentional about having a gospel presence on even the small schools. And I think junior colleges, for instance, Clay, are sometimes forgotten. It's a two-year experience. You have students moving in and out. Sometimes it's non-traditional students, but if you have a ministry at a junior college, you may be the only evangelical or the only Christian ministry there, and sometimes it's not reinventing the wheel. You do an outreach of some kind. You table on campus. You establish yourself as a student organization. You do a free, like a snack lunch. You do a discovery Bible study, and I can just tell you, countless students coming to Christ and involved in ministry, and whether they go from there. And now we're seeing a lot more students go to a two-year school and then go right into the workforce. They don't necessarily go on to a four-year school. It used to be you go to a two-year school and then you transfer to one of our four-year schools. That happens now also. But where we are in ministry now, we're on about 137 campuses around the state. We have about 230, I say, employees, and that would be just campus ministers that are all the way from campus. We call them campus missionaries. They're right out of school, and they give a year or 2 years back to serve. They raise a little bit of money. The campus provides some money for a stipend. They provide a place to live. And that really is an internship level where they serve and learn, and they do the work of evangelism and discipleship and church. They work alongside the rest of the staff to stay connected with partner churches. You never see BSU or BSM now as independent of the local church. We are the extension of the prayer and the giving of Texas Baptist churches that have that vision to reach the campus. So you want to develop believers, make disciples that make disciples. You also want to develop good church men and women that are involved during their college experience and then beyond. When they're with families and you want to set them up for leadership, not just, once they get out of college, they'll get involved in church. Now that's not acceptable from our vantage point. We want them vitally involved in local churches now. And so I hope that helps. So yeah, we're seeing incredible movement of God in this season. Lots going on within our society and culture right now, but there is a real passion and a fervor on so many of our campuses to see just take the name of Christ and lift up the name of Christ on campuses, and we're just seeing some great things happen.
With the theme of great things, you're just in a unique position than a lot of folks here on staff, that you get to see what's going on campuses, and really, I think in a lot of ways that can be glimpses into the future of what our churches are going to see, Lord willing. I know I was really fascinated with the Asbury awakening that was happening. What was that, 18 months ago now, something like that?
Right.
And just I love the idea. It's my continual hope and prayer of mine that we see a great awakening in our time. We need it. What are some things you're seeing?
I think we are seeing that happen. I can't say on all the campuses around Texas. I can say that those campuses that really prioritize, and what happened at Asbury was started with a real brokenness when it came to the students and their own sin, their own need for Jesus. It started with a desperation for God, that God alone can fill the void, God alone can guide us, God alone can be that which satisfies the deepest longings of heart and soul. And so it starts usually as a prayer movement, and that's what we've seen happen on numerous campuses, and then really a commitment to engage the culture, not to sit back and wait for people to come to us. We're seeing students of this generation willing to have conversation. They are sometimes distrustful, and you need to move from a distrust to a trust, and sometimes indifferent when it comes. Our culture is going through so many things politically, ideologically, a lot of confusion, a lot of warring within culture, and I think but with that, I think we're seeing campus ministries and churches make the most of that opportunity to be both graceful and loving and standing on biblical truth. And those don't have to be exclusive. You want to see those things going together. And we're just seeing, God, I can tell you campus after campus where, give me an example. In Midland, Odessa, we have worked with churches, multiple different churches. There's not an active association, Clay. You've got churches in Odessa and Midland, those old football rivalries. They don't necessarily play well together.
Oh my goodness, it was similar rivalry between Snyder and Sweetwater.
Snyder and Sweetwater. Okay, yeah. When
so.
You've got Midland, Odessa Permian, and then you've got Midland Lee or Midland High. You have these rivalries, but we got contacted by leaders in my first couple of years in my role. There was a desire for those churches out there to see a rebirthed work of engagement on the Midland College campus and at UT Permian Basin and then at Odessa College. And so we just kind of prayed and then met with leaders within the churches and pastors in the area. And God, just over time, God worked through different, it looked differently in a couple of places, and we saw God begin to move. And we had part-time workers going there for a while, and now we have a young couple as well as a campus missionary that are, or a couple of campus missionaries that are there, and they're engaging all three of those campuses. And we've had, I think, over this last year, probably 30 students that have come to Christ.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they have a leadership team. I think I was told 18 students, and 16 of the 18 have come to Christ over the last 2 years that they've been there. Wow. So, and the good thing is that's not outside the local church. That's in connection with multiple First Baptist Midland and some other churches, Crestview, and there's other churches in Odessa that have worked alongside to partner together. They can put aside some differences that they may have when it comes to their connections and all those things. They're saying it's more important that we reach these campuses for the Lord.
That's awesome. That's exciting. I've get to see that firsthand, at least or maybe a degree removed, when I was working the region for Tarrant County.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Gary Stidham doing great work when he was.
Yeah. He did such great work as a campus minister. He's now on our state staff as a key leader.
And just that discipleship movement of not only doing discipleship and evangelism training on the campus, but having vision for replicating the ministries across the county.
Right.
And so that
you kind of say, and we send groups to prayer walk campuses. Where is it that God is working? What churches in the area are there that could maybe partner with us to help? Like I said, it starts with a burden and those prayer walking experiences. And we have that's a great example with UTA and a number of those campuses in Tarrant. And we have now a ministry that's growing at TCU. So you have ministries at these what I call hub campuses, developing leaders, and then, as you just mentioned, prayerfully sending out with a missional concept. In other words, seeing themselves as missionaries on the campus, and now we're going to go plant missionaries, and it may be just a couple of days a week where they're doing some intentional things on that campus, because those thousands of students at that junior college matter. And some are disconnected. Some don't know the Lord at all. Some are disconnected from church. And maybe that coming to a campus Bible study or an outreach lunch where they hear a devotional word, maybe God can use that. But we've seen that happen just again and again. So I appreciate you mentioning a ministry like that, because that's one of our key strategies is to, I don't know if you've read Erwin McManus, pastor out in the Los Angeles area. He tells a story, Clay, about driving into town every morning with his son, and how they would come up over the horizon. They see the sunrise, and they were doing some ministry downtown. And I think he was taking his son to school, and he'd say, "Son, that is my city. That's who God has given me to serve. That is where God's planted, us and everything." And he just kind of would go on and on. And he said he had done that for a while, and finally his son just reached over and grabbed his arm and said, "Dad, I wish you'd stop saying it's just your city." He goes, "That's my city too." Mm-hmm. He said, "I'm going to school where my friends need to know about Jesus. That's my city too." And I think that we see the healthiest ministry happening in collaboration with churches when people say, "I own this. This is where God has called me in this season to be." I want campus ministers and staff that don't say, "I could do a dozen other things. I guess I could do BSM." I want somebody during this time that they're called to engage the campus, work with churches, prioritize evangelism and discipleship and development of leadership, prioritize connecting in partnership with churches and other Christian ministries. Yeah. And then have that missional calling. I think discipleship happens when you have that heart for, like I said, who's next and what's next. And that could be across the campus. It could be across the country. It could be across the world. We want to have that missional awareness. I think that grows deeper and stronger disciples.
I'm thinking through, like, as a pastor, if you were sitting across from a pastor who was wondering or just catching a vision of what this could be for the campuses in their neighborhood, mm-hmm. in their city, and they came to you and said, "Hey, what are some ways my church can support the work being done there?"
That's a great question.
What advice would you provide?
I think that our healthiest ministries provide both on-ramps and off-ramps for students. In other words, for churches. In other words, you want to invite the church to be a part of seeing and being a part of what's going on the campus. And like I said, prayer walks. Let's say you have a group of students that walk the campus once a week. You invite pastors and other key leaders to just walk with you. Just see open your eyes, open your heart. What is God doing? What do you see? How can we pray? You're looking for, like a missionary, you're looking for open doors. You're looking for opportunities, people of peace within different parts of the campus. And then I think there's a lot of prayer that happens there. I think that you invite them to be a part of, like we do. One way is that the free lunches that so many BSMs do free lunches and partnerships with churches.
I was a BSM director at a little TSTC community extension in Sweetwater, and so we did the free lunches.
Well, the free lunch, but I would always, what I would do is, when I was a campus minister, I'd gather the men and women that were providing that lunch, and I'd pull them together and say, what you're doing here is so much more than a lunch. It's not. You're providing an opportunity for a student that this may be as deep as they get spiritually all week. And I said, we're going to do this with integrity. We're going to serve them well and love them well, and hopefully listen and care for them, be aware of needs. And I said, we're going to clearly speak a word from God. And a lot of times it was a 5-minute. Here's a verse of Scripture. Here's something God's teaching me. Maybe a brief testimony from a student that talks about how Jesus had changed their life. They're going to hear something about Jesus when they come. And what we want is the student that feels loved and welcomed, and that would come back. Wow. And I would always tell our folks that you want that tension between the urgency of wanting to share right away as the Spirit leads, and also an embracing of the journey that says, if you love and you serve, that same student's going to come back. And a conversation you may begin, you can continue on, or you can follow up and say, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee. Let's talk a little bit more about this. In other words, the relationships built through a free lunch. It's so much more than just meeting a physical need. I remember a mentor of mine said, Mark, people come in these doors hungry for a whole lot more than chicken spaghetti. That it's good that they're getting a meal and we're meeting a need, but we know that people are hungry for more. They want a sense of purpose and belonging. They need Jesus. They need something that would satisfy the longings of their soul, and we know that Jesus is the only one that can do that. So.
Well, I know we probably, or we may have some college pastors that are tuning in with this, and I think sometimes there can be almost a mentality of competition. Yeah, I'm not saying that happens.
Yeah, that's
but that
that's honest. That's honest.
Just how they feel.
And I think that the healthiest of campus ministries, of BSM, first of all, sees themselves not as an end in of themselves. Our healthiest ministries see themselves as really catalysts for a movement of God, right? And I think that when you see a church that wants to come in and meet students, we want students involved in the church. In fact, if a student says, well, I've made a decision, I'm gonna be a part of the leadership team of this Baptist church, I'd say, wonderful. If that's what God's called you to do, let's work it. I even had, when I had a leadership team, I'd say to the college pastor, I'd say, would you send one of your students to come over and be a part of our leadership team so you could connect your church and activities-wise? I understand that our activities aren't going to necessarily always be in sync. I want to celebrate what God's. When we see a movement of God, you ask kind of what happens with a movement of God, you don't worry about who gets the credit. You don't worry about it, whether it's the church getting the credit or the BSM getting the credit. Jesus deserves the credit. What we've seen happen at Baylor this last 6 or 7 years has been nothing short of a revival-esque movement of God. What started as a prayer movement was a real collaborative effort of pastors and college leaders praying for and encouraging one another, and that commitment to it. There's a group that shares their faith on a daily basis on the Baylor campus. There's a group, they call themselves the, not Avengers, but with an E, like evangelism, it's kind of cheesy. But they get out and they're engaging in spiritual conversations, not heavy-handed, not obnoxious, realizing that Baylor, although our largest Baptist school, has a lot of students that don't know Jesus. And so you've got that. You've got right now at Baylor, there are, I think, 600 or 700 freshman students involved in a discipleship initiative that BSM trains and kind of heads up, but it's multiple churches leaning in to provide leaders. And when you start celebrating what God's doing down the street and you don't see him as competition, you see him as a partner in ministry, that's when God can really work. It's kingdom stuff. It's not my church against your church. But you're honest in saying that happens, that competition. Yeah. I want BSM never to be competition. We want to be a force multiplier.
I love how you illustrated that. This is my heartbeat. What if Baptists were known for uniting around the gospel rather than dividing over other issues?
Golly, my goodness.
I think, man, we could see the Spirit move in some amazing ways.
I think we can get caught, and I know you didn't necessarily go down this road, we can get caught up in a lot of other tangential issues that we can focus on.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that what's happened recently with the violence on campuses and with Charlie Kirk and all that, I hope that as opposed to doubling down on ideology politically or anything, I want us to say let's put the gospel and Jesus as our only hope at the forefront, and let's talk about him first in the midst of all this.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah. I just have one thing I want to push back on. I think the largest Baptist school in Texas is A&M, and so
it's A&M. You know what? There are a whole lot of
that may not be the best. Baptists don't always get the best reputation.
I think I shared with you before we started recording that there's such a huge Christian subculture at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. There's a lot to be celebrated about that. There are clubs and fraternities and sororities and churches and
breakaway,
breakaway, huge things. So there's great things going on there. And I think I would challenge our Christian students to balance that, being finding a place to be connected, finding a place to be discipled and grow, finding a place to worship. I love breakaways and great teaching, great worship. But there are a whole lot of ags that aren't going to breakaway.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of ags that aren't in anybody's church or ministry that love their time at the Chicken and
find yourself a cadet and invest in him. And so I know there's some cool stuff happening with the Corps Cadets.
There's some, and I think there's, because it, and it's we're in Texas, we're in the South. We have a lot of folks that can speak the language of the saved, and they can put up a pretty strong veneer of Christianese. They can speak Christianese real well when their hearts and their minds are not with the Lord. And I think you're not going to find that out. First, you don't come in guns blazing. You come in, build a relationship. You look for what's authentic. I think the need for whatever the culture is, A&M or wherever the school is authentic Christian living, where I'm not living just for myself. I'm not living for my own happiness. I'm living outside of myself, focusing on the hurts and the needs and the brokenness around me.
Well, shifting gears just a little bit, still staying with the college ministry focus, but one of the things that hit me as you're talking about this and just the potential on campus to reach people for Christ, I think of schools like UNT in Dallas, University of North Texas. And
great school, great academic school, but
I'm also thinking
very different kind of school.
Different kind of school, and the number of international students that are on campus. And so what opportunity do we have right now in Texas when we think about the student body and the diversity of it, where a lot of that is international?
Yeah. I think, and you mentioned UNT. UNT would be a great example. UTA, UT Dallas, all three of those schools here, just right here in the Metroplex area, have a huge number of students that come from all over the world. I tell folks at UTA, you can get out of your vehicle and walk to the building or whatever, and you hear three languages spoken. I mean, so I think we do well to, when I say map well, we have to learn our context. And I tell our campus ministers, I want them to be experts in their context. If you've got different people groups there, I want you to lean in and know who those folks are. What do they value within their culture? They're bringing their culture to bear, or part of their country. They're wanting to learn American culture. They're here with us on a university campus. There's some unique. You can't treat all. There's not one way of approaching internationals other than seeking to know them, to love them and serve them. I think looking for ways to open lives, open homes, to create spaces for them. Texas A&M is one. They're right in that Northgate area, right around lots of internationals, and they have a real focused effort on engaging different people groups within the international community. It's not just, hey, we're just going to reach all internationals. Let's look at the students from Nepal, or let's look at they have right now a dedicated Hispanic ministry that was started by students, kind of ground. They wasn't leadership saying let's start it. It was students asking for that, and now I think they've got like 50 or 60 students that are A&M students. That's an affinity group that they want to do some things together, and so we've tried to provide the space and the resources and people that have a heart for them, and learn a little bit more about their culture when we bring the gospel to bear. What backgrounds do they have that they're bringing to the table? And I think our best schools that do evangelism on campus, whether that's within the building or outside the building, you've got to constantly learn and grow. If you have a lot of Muslim students that you're engaging, or a lot of Hindu students, well, you better know something about what it means to be a Muslim.
University of Texas Arlington, UTA. I know that's something that they
huge.
They excelled at.
They pray, they train, they go out and share, they come back and they debrief, they train some more, they pray some more, and they embrace that journey of going out on a regular basis. They have a certain rhythm. And when you're involved in leadership, you're expected to go out, and you may not be the one that talks all the time, but you're to get out of context, to get out of the building. And then they do some things. They do some ESL. They do some English training, because a lot of students come and families come. You look for some of the needs that you can meet, and you meet physical needs. You build a bridge, and you open a door. Maybe you help people with food, or a couple of our campuses do big furniture giveaways when the semester starts. They fill their whole building with donated furniture, and then international students come and they're allowed to just take furniture as they need it. Well, that opens a door. Yeah. That has a ministry purpose. It's not a bait and switch, but you build a relationship. You follow up with that person and say, hey, how else? And they go, well, why did you do that for us? Well, it's because we love Jesus. Can I tell you about this Jesus that we love? And it's just great opportunities.
I mean, you're by reaching students on campus, then you really do have an opportunity to do global missions on the campus.
On the campus, it starts. It better start there. We kid ourselves if we think we're going to do missions on the other side of the world if we're not willing to prayerfully engage the campus that we're on. That's the easy accessibility. I don't have to buy a plane ticket. I don't have to.
And it's not if it's
it's not an either or. But I think there is something to be said for getting out of context and being in a different country and seeing people live within their people group. There is some value there. But I love, I just the idea of being in a dorm, on a campus. I want our Christians that live in dorms to see those as great missional opportunities. I would say I want my Christian students to be walking the halls, and not in a creepy way, but to stop in front of every door and say, God, I pray for the students that live here. Hopefully you're knowing names, and you're saying, I pray for these two people. I pray that they would know you if they don't know you. I pray they would grow. I pray for opportunities to engage them and to love them as only you can. And I don't know, I just think that it comes back to ownership. Wherever God has placed you, make the most of that opportunity in your college. I waited tables when I was in college years ago, and man, I just prayed in that restaurant. I enjoyed it. It was hard. But you embrace where God's put. Those group of people that I spent time with waiting tables. That was an opportunity. I think we hope that happens for our believers on our campuses. I think that I mentioned those on ramps versus off ramps. I think that you want to create opportunities within the local churches for students to serve, and there needs to be, from our vantage point in the campus ministry, help. Those that are called to ministry. I love the idea of developing mentoring relationships. If someone's called, a lot of times I would recognize in a student that they've got a word gift. For instance, they got up in front of their fellow students and they could. And I thought, probably that they don't necessarily. I don't have to say, well, they're called to do collegiate ministry. Well, they may not be. They may be called into a local church ministry, whether it's youth ministry or pastoral ministry. we want to enhance those relationships with church staff to help develop leaders. And then, like I said, those ways for the churches to connect. One thing we did, kind of almost silly, but I felt like it was kind of fun and creative. We did free laundry for college students late night, and I involved churches to come, and they brought big things of quarters. That was back when it was quarters that you pumped into machines, and this group of men would come, and it gave them a mission point. They would help. We would reach out to the football team or the basketball team, and they'd bring all their laundry. And the great thing about doing laundry with people is they were kind of a captive audience. Once you put the stuff in the washers and the dryers, they're hanging out. And so we did games and giveaways. We did music. We did of course, they like competing. We did like all sorts of crazy things. Yeah. But you build relationships and you share the gospel. And I remember this big old football player comes over, and he was just weeping. He goes, I've been to church before and everything. He goes, I've never had anybody wash my clothes. He goes, this is amazing. And he ended up asking all those questions. Guy followed up with him, shared the gospel. He ended up coming to Christ, getting involved in a Bible study. Still stays in touch with us, with me and our ministry. And you just never know what God might do through simple things. And I think helping churches do simple things to connect with the campus, with college students. You can have them whether you adopt. We did a dorm adoption. In cooperation with the student life, they were okay with that. We kind of had churches adopt different dorms and pray for, do cookouts, do some things that really focused on the needs there. A lot of our junior colleges, they're looking for activities because they're trying to build student life. They don't necessarily have a lot of resources to do. That was my case on
being an extension. It was a very non-traditional campus. And there really wasn't much campus life. And so they were desperate for anything that we could provide from our local association at the time to help them do that through the BSM.
Well, what do students want? They want something meaningful in their college experience. If if you can do some things to enhance relationships, help them to have a little bit of fun, I think, and also when I say distrust to trust, to see Christians taking the Jesus seriously, but not taking themselves as seriously sometimes. We're here to just love you and serve you. There's no, I'm not asking anything of you right now. I just want to get to know you and share about the Jesus that I know.
It's such an impactful time in people's lives, in college. For me, a local church was that formational moment. I was on the verge of walking away from church in college.
I'm so glad you didn't. Yeah,
I'm glad I didn't either. And what brought me back, it was a smaller church. There were big college ministries in College Station, and Living Hope Baptist Church, a shout out. At the time, it was a younger church, and we're really intentional about integrating college students with other generations within the church.
That's a real valuable to think that the mindset is they don't really want to know, or that's not true.
I needed that. I needed older men in my life.
The mentors, the idea of a mentorship program.
And then they did a great job of also for students that felt a call to ministry at the time. Butch Smith, who was the pastor there, had a shepherding program.
Love it.
Where it was just
one semester. Those are creative ideas that
and just prayed with and
I think churches that are willing to work with a campus ministry, let's try some things, and they may or may not hit. And I'm one that let's throw a couple of hooks in the water and see what hits, and let's just try. And if your heart is I want to engage, sometimes churches can feel sometimes a little overwhelmed. Where do I even start? And I think for a good church-college ministry relationship, there need to be simple access points where we could allow for, hey, why don't you come over and help us do this? Absolutely. With so many millennials taking on responsibility within the churches, they don't want to just hear about doing something. They want to do. Yeah. They want to go and do and be a part of it.
More, they want to be hands-on involved. They want to be
experiential. That's right. They want authentic. We could talk more about Gen Z and everything at another time. But again, thanks for having me here. This has been so good.
Well, thank you for coming on to Ministry Conversations. Yeah, this has been really good.
Appreciate you, Clay. Yeah. And again, thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Ministry Conversations. Ministry Conversations is made possible through your giving to the Texas Baptist Cooperative Program. Have a topic you want to hear about? Let us know by emailing news@texasbaptist.org.